Gotcha. I know I said previously this video was next after the Valentine's special, but it was all a lie. All of it. The wheel meant nothing. Just a ploy for my elaborate ruse. So if you thought this hour-long video was all about glorious, beautiful, divine, two-dimensional goddesses, then check the release date. April fucking Fools, bitches! Get clickbaited, you absolute goober. Or gooner. The thumbnail is probably gonna attract those. If you're one of the couple regular viewers, I'm almost hurt that you'd believe I'd upload an hour of glazing anime girls. Who do you take me for? Some sort of weeb or something? If you're a rando who just clicked on some anime titties, then sorry pal. Sucks to suck. Here's the entire Wikipedia page for the history of Mongolia.
Xiongnu, 209 BC, 93 AD. The establishment of the Xiongnu Empire in Mongolia in the 3rd century BC marks the beginning of statehood in the territory of Mongolia. The identity of the ethnic core of Xiongnu has been a subject of varied hypotheses in some scholars, including Alexei Okladnikov, Paul Pelliot, and Byam Rinchen, 12, who insisted on a Mongolic origin. There are many cultural similarities between the Xiongnu and Mongols such as Yurdong Kart, composite bow, board games, horn bow, and long song, 13. Mongolian long song is believed to date back at least 2,000 years, 14. Mythical origin of the long song mentioned in Book of Wei, Volume 113. The first significant appearance of nomads came late in the 3rd century BC, when the Chinese repelled an invasion of the Xiongnu across the Yellow River from the Gobi. The founder of the Xiongnu Empire was Tumen. He was violently succeeded by his son Modu Xiongnu, who then conquered and unified various tribes. At the peak of its power, the Xiongnu Confederacy stretched from Lake Baikal in the north to the Great Wall in the south and from the Tian Shan Mountains in the west to the Greater Shingon Ranges in the east. In the 2nd century BC, the Xiongnu turned their attention westward to the region of the Altai Mountains and Lake Balkhash, inhabited by Indo-European-speaking nomadic peoples, including Yuezhi, Yuchi, and Wade Giles, who had relocated from China's present-day Gansu province as a result of their earlier defeat by the Xiongnu. Endemic warfare between these two nomadic peoples reached a climax in the latter part of the 3rd century and the early decades of the 2nd century BC. The Xiongnu were triumphant. The Yuezhi then migrated to the southwest where, early in the 2nd century, they began to appear in the Oxus, the modern Amu Darya Valley, to change the course of history in Bactria, Iran, and eventually India. In 200 BC, the Han dynasty of China launched a military campaign into the territory, attempting to subjugate the Xiongnu. However, the Xiongnu forces ambushed and encircled the Han Emperor Gaozu at Baidang for 7 days. Emperor Ye was forced to submit to the Xiongnu, and a treaty was signed in 198 BC recognizing all the territories to the north from the Great Wall should belong to the Xiongnu, while the territory to the south of the Great Wall should belong to the Han. In addition, China was obliged to marry princesses and pay annual tribute to the Xiongnu. This marriage alliance was far from peaceful, as Xiongnu raids into the fertile southern land never ceased. The Xiongnu again raided northern China around 200 BC, finding that the inadequately defended Great Wall was not a serious obstacle. By the middle of the 2nd century BC, they controlled all of northern and western China north of the Yellow River. This renewed threat led the Chinese to improve their defenses in the north, while building up and improving the army, particularly the cavalry, and while preparing long-range plans for an invasion of Mongolia. By 176 BC, domain of the Xiongnu covered 4,030,000 square kilometers, 1,560,000 square miles. 15. Xiongnu's capital was located on the beach of the Orkhon River in central Mongolia. 16. A Chinese army, which had adopted Xiongnu military technology, wearing trousers and using mounted archers with stirrups, pursued the Xiongnu across the Gobi Desert in a ruthless punitive expedition. Fortified walls built by various Chinese warring states were connected to make a 2,300 kilometers, 1,400 miles, Great Wall along the northern border, as a barrier to further nomadic inroads. Between 130 and 121 BC, Chinese armies drove the Xiongnu back across the Great Wall, weakened their hold on Gansu province as well as on what is now Inner Mongolia, and finally pushed them north of the Gobi into central Mongolia. The Xiongnu, once more turning their attention to the west and the southwest, raided deep into the Oxus Valley between 73 and 44 BC. The descendants of the Yuezhi and their Chinese rulers, however, formed a common front against the Xiongnu and repelled them. During the next century, as Chinese strength waned, border warfare between the Chinese and the Xiongnu was almost constant. Gradually, the nomads forced their way back into Gansu and the northern part of what is now China's Xinjiang. In about the middle of the 1st century AD, a revitalized Eastern Han dynasty, 25 to 220 AD, slowly recovered these territories, driving the Xiongnu back into the Altai Mountains and the steppes north of the Gobi. During the late 1st century AD, having re-established administrative control over southern China and northern Vietnam that had been lost briefly at the beginning of this same century, the Eastern Han made a concerted effort to reassert dominance over Inner Asia. In 48 AD, the Xiongnu Empire was weakened as it was divided into the southern and northern Xiongnu. The northern Xiongnu migrated to the west. They established Weban State, 160 to 490, in modern Kazakhstan and the Hunnic Empire, 370s 469, in Europe. The Xinbei that were under the Xiongnu rebelled in 93 AD, ending the Xiongnu domination in Mongolia. Recent excavations of Xiongnu graves at the site Joel Mod in the Kherson of Arkhangai province discovered bronze decorations with images of a creature resembling the unicorn and images of deities resembling the Greco-Roman deities. These discoveries lead to a hypothesis that the Xiongnu had relations with the Greco-Roman world 2,000 years ago. 17. Xinbei, 147 to 234. The Xinbei, or Xinpei and Wade Giles, were the northern branch of the Donghu, or Tonghu, the Eastern Hu, a proto-Mongol group mentioned in Chinese histories as existing as early as the 4th century BC. The language of the Donghu is believed to be proto-Mongolic by modern scholars. The Donghu were among the first peoples conquered by the Xiongnu. Once the Xiongnu state weakened, however, the Donghu rebelled. By the 1st century AD, two major subdivisions of the Donghu had developed, the proto-Mongolic Xinbei in the north and the Wuwan in the south. When the Xiongnu split into two parts in AD 48, the Xinbei moved, apparently from the east, into the region vacated by the Xiongnu. The Xinbei gained strength beginning from the 1st century AD and were consolidated into a state under Tanshi Huai in 147. He expelled the Xiongnu from Young Arya and pushed the Dingling to the north of the Sions, thus securing domination of the Mongolic elements in what is now Khalkha and Chaheria. 18. The Xinbei successfully repelled an invasion of the Han dynasty in 167 and conquered areas of northern China in 180. There are various hypotheses about the language and ethnic links of the Xinbei, and the most widely accepted version suggests that the Xinbei were a Mongolic ethnic group and their branches are the ancestors of many Mongolic peoples such as the Rouran, Khitan, and Mingu Xibei, who are suggested to be proto-Mongols. 19. The ruler of the Xinbei state was elected by a congress of nobility. The Xinbei used woodcut tallies called kimu as a form of nonverbal communication. Besides extensive livestock husbandry, the Xinbei were also engaged on a limited scale in farming and handicraft. The Xianbei fractured in the 3rd century. The Xianbei established an empire, which, although short-lived, gave rise to numerous tribal states along the Chinese frontier. Among these states was that of the Toba, Tapa and Weidijiles, a subgroup of the Xianbei, in modern China's Shaanxi province. The Wuhuan also were prominent in the 2nd century, but they disappeared thereafter. Possibly they were absorbed in the Xianbei western expansion. The Xianbei and the Wuhuan used mounted archers in warfare, and they had temporary war leaders instead of hereditary chiefs. Agriculture, rather than full-scale nomadism, was the basis of their economy. In the 6th century, the Wuhuan were driven out of Inner Asia into the Russian, clarification needed, steppe. Chinese control of parts of Inner Asia did not last beyond the opening years of the 2nd century AD, and, as the Eastern Han dynasty ended early in the 3rd century AD, suzerainty was limited primarily to the Gansu corridor. The Xianbei were able to make forays into a China beset with internal unrest and political disintegration. By 317, all of China north of the Yangtze River had been overrun by nomadic peoples, the Xianbei from the north, some remnants of the Xiongnu from the northwest, and the Chang people of Gansu and Tibet from the west and the southwest. Chaos prevailed as these groups warred with each other and repulsed the efforts of the fragmented Chinese kingdoms south of the Yangtze River to reconquer the region. Tuoba, a faction of the Xianbei, established the Tuoba Wei Empire in northern China in 386. By the end of the 4th century, the region between the Yangtze and the Gobi, including much of modern Xinjiang, was dominated by the Tuoba. Emerging as the partially Sinicized state of Dai between AD 338 and 376 in the Shaanxi area, the Tuoba established control over the region as the Northern Wei, AD 386 to 533. Northern Wei armies drove back the Ruren, a newly arising nomadic Mongol people in the steppes north of the Altai Mountains, and reconstructed the Great Wall. During the 4th century also, the Huns left the steppes north of the Aral Sea to invade Europe. Dubious, discuss. By the middle of the 5th century, Northern Wei had penetrated into the Darim Basin in Inner Asia, as the Chinese had in the 2nd century. As the empire grew, however, Tuoba tribal customs were supplanted by those of the Chinese, an evolution not accepted by all Tuoba. Tuoba Wei existed until 581. Ruren Khaganate, 330 to 555. A branch of the Xianbei, the Ruren, also known as Niruan, were consolidated under Mugilu. In the late 5th century, the Ruren established a powerful nomadic empire spreading north of the Northern Wei. It was probably the Ruren who first used the title Khan for their supreme rulers. The Ruren ruled Mongolia, eastern Kazakhstan, part of Gansu, northern Xinjiang, inner Mongolia, parts of northeastern China and southern Siberia. The Hephalites was a vassal state to the Ruren for 100 years. 20. Shiluan assumed the title of Khagan in 402, landmarking the establishment of the Ruren Khaganate. The Tuoba waged long wars against the Ruren Khaganate. The Gokturks that were subjects of the Ruren revolted in 552, establishing the Turkic Khaganate. The Ruren Khaganate was finally defeated by the Gokturks in 555. Some of the Ruren left the present territory of Mongolia. A number of historians maintain that they established the Avarian Khaganate between the river Danube and the Carpathian Mountains. 21. The Rurens that stayed in Mongolia became the ancestors of the Tatar tribes. 19. The Tatars and other Mongol tribes lived in the eastern part Mongolia during the Turkic period. Other Mongols that migrated east returned in the 8th century. Turkic period, 555 to 840. The Northern Wei in northern China was disintegrating rapidly because of revolts of semi-tribal Tuoba military forces that were opposed to being Sinicized, when disaster struck the flourishing Ruren Khaganate. In 552 AD, the Gokturks, who were subjects to the Ruren and served as blacksmiths, revolted against their Ruren rulers. The uprising began in the Altai Mountains, where many were serfs working the iron mines. Therefore, the Gokturks' revolt of 552 is often called the Blacksmiths' Rebellion. The uprising was headed by Bumin Khagan, who became the founder of the first Turkic Khaganate. Thus, from the outset of their revolt, they had the advantage of controlling what had been one of the major bases of Ruren power. Between 546 and 553, the Gokturks overthrew the Ruren and established themselves as the most powerful force in Central Asia. The Northern Qi and Northern Zhou dynasties of China surrendered in 570 and began paying tribute to the Gokturks. However, the newly established Sui dynasty stopped sending tribute to the Gokturks and constant war between the Sui and Turkic Khaganate began. The Turkic Khaganate was partitioned in 583 into an Eastern Turkic Khaganate and Western Turkic Khaganate through a plot made by the Sui. Finally, in 584, the Eastern Turks recognized Sui suzerainty. The Turkic Khaganate began to revolt and hasten the border in 615 after Emperor Yang of Sui's failed expedition in Goguryeo. The internal struggle between the Turkic nobles led to their defeat by the Tang dynasty of China in 630. From 629 to 648, a reunited China under the Tang dynasty destroyed the power of the Eastern Turks north of the Gobi, established suzerainty over the Khitan, a semi-nomadic par-Mongolic people who lived in areas that became the modern Chinese provinces of Heilongjiang and Jilin, and established the Anbei Protectorate in the Mongolian steppes. The Uyghur Khagan was installed as Anbei Protector, who inhabited the region between the Altai Mountains and Khitan's land. Between 641 and 648, the Tang conquered the Western Turks, re-establishing Chinese sovereignty over Xinjiang and exacting tribute from west of the Pamir Mountains. The Gokturks continuously struggled against the subjugation by the Tang dynasty started in 679. An uprising of 682 under the leadership of Kutuluk and Tanyukuk led to restoration of the Turkic Khaganate, known as the Second Turkic Khaganate. For a brief period at the beginning of the 7th century, a new consolidation of Gokturks, under the Western Turk ruler Tardu, again threatened China. In 701, Tardu's army besieged Chang'an, modern Xi'an, then the capital of China. Tardu was turned back, however, and, upon his death 2 years later, the Turkic state again fragmented. The Eastern Turks nonetheless continued their depredations, occasionally threatening Chang'an. In the early 8th century, an invading army of 450,000 soldiers headed by the Wuzhou Empress regnant Wu Zetian was defeated and chased back by Mojo Khagan. 19. The Turkic Empire finally ended in 744 by the combined forces of Chinese, Uyghurs, and other nomads. Uyghur Khaganate, 744 to 840. The Uyghurs, who were subjects to the Gokturks, revolted in 744 and founded the Uyghur Khaganate, which replaced the Eastern Turkic Khaganate. The Uyghur Khagan Bayanchur established the city of Ordubailik on the Orkhon River in 751. Tang China invited the Uyghurs to subdue the Anlushan rebellion in 755. Successful campaigns of the Uyghur Khaganate led to a peace with the Tang dynasty, which paid compensation for the suppression of Anlushan in silk and grain for 12 years after 766. 22. Though a faction of the Uyghurs were Buddhists, Manichaeism became the official religion of the Khaganate in the 8th century. Nevertheless, the majority of the Uyghurs remained shamanists. The culture and economy of the Uyghur Khaganate were more advanced than those of its predecessors. The Uyghurs used a 12-month calendar and calculated the dates of solar and lunar eclipses. The Uyghurs developed their own writing system based on Sogdian script. The Tang dynasty secretly encouraged the Yenisei Kyrgyz and Karluks to attack the Uyghurs, and the Uyghur Khaganate fell under an invasion of the Yenisei Kyrgyz in 840. The destruction of Uyghur Khaganate by the Yenisei Kyrgyz resulted in the end of Turkic dominance in Mongolia. According to historians, the Yenisei Kyrgyz were not interested in assimilating newly acquired lands. The Kyrgyz state was centered on Caucasia. Liao dynasty, 916 to 1125. The Khitans were an ethnic group whose language was related to the Mongolic languages. Its Khagan Yelu Aboji claimed imperial title in 916 and established the Liao dynasty. The Liao dynasty covered a significant portion of what is now Mongolia, including the basins of the three rivers Kurlan, Tul, and Orkhon. The Khitans occupied the areas vacated by the Turkic Uyghurs, bringing them under their control. The Liao dynasty soon grew strong and occupied parts of northern China, including modern-day Beijing. By 925, the Khitans ruled eastern Mongolia, most of Manchuria, and much of China proper north of the Yellow River. By the middle of the 10th century, Khitan chieftains had established themselves as emperors of northern China, and the Liao dynasty is considered a dynasty of China. The Khitans built cities and exerted dominion over their agricultural subjects as a means of consolidating their empire. The territory of the empire consisted of two parts, one populated by pastoral herders in the north and the other populated by croppers in the south. The two parts of the empire actively traded with each other. Lubugu, a grandson of Ambazian, and a scholar named Tiliubu developed a grand alphabet based on the Chinese hieroglyphics in 920. Later, Tila, a son of Ambazian, developed a minor alphabet based on the Uyghur script. A printing technology developed in the Liao territory. The Khitan language was widely studied abroad. A Tungusic people, the Jurchens, ancestors of the Manchus, formed an alliance with the Song dynasty and reduced the Liao dynasty to vassal status in a 7-year war, 1115 to 1122. The Jurchen leader Wanyenaguda proclaimed himself the founder of a new empire, the Jin dynasty. Scarcely pausing in their conquests, the Jurchens subdued neighboring Goryeo in 1226, citation needed, and invaded the territory of their former allies, the Song dynasty, to precipitate a series of wars with the Song that continued through the remainder of the century. The Liao dynasty fell in 1125. Some Khitans fled west under the leadership of Yeludashi after their defeat by the Jurchens and founded the Western Liao dynasty, 1124 to 1218, in present-day Xinjiang and eastern Kazakhstan with capital in Balasagun, modern Kyrgyzstan. In addition, the Western Liao also controlled some highly autonomous vassalized states, such as Khwarezm, the Eastern and the Western Karakhanids, etc. In 1218, Genghis Khan destroyed the Western Liao, after which the Khitans passed into obscurity. The modern-day minority of Mongolic-speaking Dors in China are their direct descendants based on DNA evidence, 23, 24, and other Khitans assimilated into the Mongols, Southern Mongols, Turkic peoples, and Han Chinese. Medieval period. Confederations and Khanates in the 12th century. 12th century Mongolia was characterized by rivalry between many tribes and confederations, Khanligs or Khanate. A confederation of tribes under the name Mongol was known from the 8th century. Some Shirwei tribes, though little is known, have been considered the ancestors of the Mongols according to ancient Chinese records. Term Shirwei was an umbrella term of the Mongolic and Tungusic peoples in the 6th to 12th centuries. During the 5th century, they occupied the area east of the Greater Shingon Range, what is the Hulunber, Argun, Urgyun, Nun, Noon, Middle Amur, and the Zaya watersheds. They may have been divided into 5 to 20 tribes. They were said to be dressed in fish skins. They may have been nomadic, staying in the marshy lowlands in the winter and the mountains during the summer. The burial was by exposure in trees. Their language is described as being similar to Manchu Tungusic languages and Khitan. The Turkic Khaganate installed Tudans, or governors over the Shirwei and collected tribute. Other Shirwei may have stayed and become the Evenks. The Khitans conquered the Shirwei during the late 9th century. One Shirwei tribe, living near the Amur and Urgyun rivers, was called the Minggu, Mongol. The confederations of core Mongol tribes were transforming into a statehood in the early 12th century and came to be known as the Kamic Mongol Confederacy. The people of Mongolia at this time were predominantly spirit worshippers, with shamans providing spiritual and religious guidance to the people and tribal leaders. The Kamic Mongols occupied one of the most fertile areas of the country, the basins of the rivers Onon, Kurlan, and Tol in the Kentiai Mountains. The first known Khan of Kamic Mongol is Kabul Khan from Kayad tribe. Kabul Khan successfully repelled the invasions of Jin dynasty. He was succeeded by Ambagai Khan from Taishid tribe. Ambagai was captured by the Tatars while he came to deliver his daughter as a bride to the Tatar Confederacy and was given to the Jurchens of Jin dynasty who cruelly executed him, nailing to a wooden donkey. Ambagai was succeeded by Hachula Khan, son of Kabul Khan. Hachula Khan engaged in 13 battles with the Tatars endeavoring to avenge Ambagai Khan. Kamic Mongol was unable to elect a Khan after Hachula died. However, Kabul's grandson Yasuki Baghator was a major chief of Kamic Mongol. Yasuki was poisoned by the Tatars in 1171 when his eldest son Temujin was 9 years old. Shortly after Yasuki died, Targadai Kiriltug of Taishid moved away with the subjects of Yasuki, leaving young Temujin, his mother and his younger siblings without support. Hence, Kamic Mongol remained in political crisis until 1189. In the 12th century the Kamic Mongol Khanate, Tatar Confederation, Karait Khanate, Merkit Confederation, Nayman Khanate were 5 major Mongolic tribal confederations and Khanates in the Mongolian plateau. The Tatar Confederacy first appeared in recorded history in 732. The Tatars became subjects of the Khitan in the 10th century. After the fall of the Khitan Empire, the Tatars experienced pressure from the Jin dynasty and were urged to fight against the other Mongol tribes. The Tatars lived on the fertile pastures around the lakes Huluan and Bir and occupied a trade route to China. The Karaits between the mountain ranges of Kongai and Kentiai were centered on the site of today's city Ulaanbaatar in the willow groves of the Tol River. Marcus Bayrut Khan was Khan of the Karaits in the 12th century. Marcus was succeeded by Turul Khan. In his feud with his brothers for the throne of the Karaits, he was repeatedly aided by Yasuki Baghator of Kamic Mongol. The merged confederacy was located in the basin of the river Selenge. The Hori Tums and Beryats lived around the lake Baikal. The Nayman Confederacy was situated between the mountain ranges of Altai and Kongai. The Ongat tribes lived at the north of Gobi. Other tribes were Okonut, Bayad, Kongarad, Oirats, and so forth. While most of the Mongolian tribes were shamanists, Nestorian Christianity was practiced in a number of confederations such as Karaits and Ongat. Consolidation of the Mongol state. Temujin, 1162 to 1227, defeated and subjugated the three Merjids in 1189 with the support of Turul Khan of Karait, the blood brother of his father. Another ally who helped Temujin in this venture was his own blood brother Jamuka of Jadaram clan. The Merjids had attacked the home of Temujin and captured his wife Borte of Hongarad tribe, revenging for a much earlier event in which Temujin's father Yasuki deprived a Merjid chief Chilidu his bride Holan of Okonut tribe, who became the mother of Temujin. The striving of Temujin to free his wife became a reason for the campaign against the Merjids. After the defeat of the Merjid, the reputation of Temujin rose rapidly and the leading members of the Kamic Mongol aristocracy enthroned him with title Chinggis Khan, Genghis Khan, as the ruler of Kamic Mongol. It is speculated to be an ancient form of the word Tengiz, ocean, sea. A conflict of the Tatars with the Jin dynasty became a favorable opportunity for Temujin and Turul Khan to defeat them in alliance with the Jurchens. At this point, Turul Khan was granted the title Wang, Chinese for king, by the Jin court and since then became known as Wang Khan. By the year 1201, the Taishid and Jurchen tribes were defeated and subjugated. Influential aristocrats of many other tribes and confederations were joining Temujin. In 1201, a crisis ignited in the Karait Khanlig, in which the siblings of Turul Wang Khan allied with Anancha Khan of Nayman and defeated Turul. Wang Khan regained power in his kingdom with the support of Temujin. Temujin finally defeated and subjugated the Tatars in 1202. Nilha, childish, Sangam, son of Wang Khan, envied Temujin as his power was growing and persuaded his father to battle against Temujin. This venture led to a victory of Temujin and conquest of the Karait Khanlik. Wang Khan escaped alone into the southern deserts of the Nayman Khanlig, where he was caught by the Nayman patrols, who killed him irritated as he claimed himself as Wang Khan. Tayin Khan of Nayman and his son Kuklug initiated a campaign against Temujin in 1204. They allied with Jamuka, who competed with Temujin for the power over the Mongolic tribes. The Nayman troops outnumbered the Temujin's troops. At night at the eve of the battle, Temujin ordered each of his warrior to light 10 bonfires, thus deceiving and demoralizing Tayin Khan, who was a weak warlord. Temujin won the battle. Tayin Khan was captured but died of his wound. Kuklug retreated to the river Irtych where he was overtaken by Temujin and defeated. After this battle, Kuklug escaped to Gurkhan of Kitai. As the Khanlik of Naiman was conquered, Kasar, brother of Temujin, found a dignitary named Tatartunga/Tatatunga, who spread the Uyghur alphabet among the Mongols. This alphabet became the basis of the classical Mongol script. By 1206, all the tribes and confederations of Mongolian steppe had come under the leadership of Temujin. The success of Temujin in consolidation of the Mongols was due to his flexibility, his cherishing of his friends, and his elaborated tactics. A congress of the Mongol aristocrats on the river Onan in 1206 enthroned Temujin as Genghis Khan, as emperor of all Mongols. Formation of the Mongol Empire. The Mongol Empire and the states that emerged from it played a major role in the history of the 13th and 14th centuries. Genghis Khan and his immediate successors conquered nearly all of Asia and European Russia and sent armies as far as Central Europe and Southeast Asia. Genghis Khan abolished the organization of the former tribes and confederations and reformed the country into 95 mangats. In this system, a group of households large enough to mobilize 10 warriors was organized into an arbatu, 10 arbatas were organized into a zagutu, 100 warriors, 10 zagutas constituted a mingat, 1,000 warriors, and 10 mangats constituted a temetu or tumun, 10,000 warriors. This decimal system was a long-tested system that had been inherited from the period of the Xiongnu. With an assumption that each household consisted of 4 persons and every adult male was a warrior, it can be estimated that the entire population of Mongolia was at least 750,000 people and the nation possessed 95,000 cavalrymen. The newly unified Great Mongol state became an attractive force for many neighboring peoples and kingdoms. Beginning from 1207, the Uyghur state, Tega people of the river Yenisei and the Karluk kingdom joined Mongolia. The urgent task of Genghis Khan was strengthening the independence of his young nation. For a century, the southeastern neighbor Jin dynasty had been provoking the Mongolic tribes against one another in order to eventually subjugate them. With the purpose of testing the military strength of his state and preparing for a struggle against the Jin dynasty, Genghis Khan conquered the Tengat-led Western Xia, which pledged vassalage. In a year, the Mongols, with over 90,000 cavalrymen, started a war with the Jin dynasty which had a multi-million population. At this stage, the Mongols passed over the Great Wall, invaded Shaanxi and Shandong provinces, and approached the river Yellow River. The Altan, Golden, Khan, Jin Emperor, surrendered in 1214 and gave Genghis Khan his princess and tribute of gold and silver to his warlords. Genghis Khan gave out to his warriors the tribute of the Jin Emperor loaded on 3,000 horses. However, the Jin dynasty continued hostility against Mongolia, hence Genghis Khan ordered his warlord Gwang Mukilai of the Jalar clan to complete the conquest of the Jin dynasty and return to Mongolia. Later, the warlord Jib of the Sud clan defeated Kuchulug who had become the Gurkhan of Kitai. His power was weak as he, a Buddhist, persecuted the indigenous Muslim population. Genghis Khan intended to develop friendly relations with the Khwarezm Empire, which was on a junction of the trade routes connecting the east and the west and dominated Central Asia, Iran, and Afghanistan. Genghis Khan considered himself a supreme ruler of the east and Khwarezm Shah a supreme ruler of the west. Khwarezm Shah had an opposite view that there should be only one ruler on earth as there is only one sun in the sky, citation needed. The execution of 450 envoys and tradesmen of Genghis Khan by Khwarezm Shah 1218 was an announcement of war. The Mongol troops invaded Khwarezm Empire in 1219. Although Khwarezm Shah possessed an army outnumbering the Mongol troops dozen of times, he lacked the courage and initiatives to unite his forces and fight back, citation needed. The Mongol troops sacked cities Otur, Buhara, Merv, and Samarkand. Shah's warlord Timur Melik led a daring resistance when the Mongol troops besieged city of Kujand. Shah's son Jalal al-Din Mangburni courageously battled with the Mongol army in 1221, but was defeated and escaped to the river Indus. Pursuing Khwarezm Shah in 1220, the scout groups of warlords Jib and Sabidi Bagathur of Uryankai clan conquered northern Iran. They invaded Iraq, Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Georgia in 1221 and entered the territories of the Kipchak Khanate in Crimea and grasslands of the northern Black Sea. The Kipchaks allied with the troops of the principalities of Rus gave battle to the 30,000 cavalrymen of Jib and Sabidi on the river Kalka in May 1223, but were defeated and were chased up to the river Dnieper. The Western Xia denied its obligation as a vassal state to take part in the western campaign of Genghis Khan. Shortly after returning to Mongolia, the Mongol army invaded the Western Xia in 1226 and conquered the capital Zhongxing, located in modern Yinchuan. The Western Xia completely surrendered in March 1227. Mongolic Khitans and Tuyuhuns or Mongol people, 1227, came under rule of the Mongol Empire after its conquest of the Western Xia and Jin dynasties. The Kara Kitai, Western Liao, was conquered by the Mongols under Genghis Khan in 1218. The 16-year conquests of Genghis Khan resulted in the formation of the Mongol Empire. He died on August 16, 1227 and was buried at Site Ihe Otog on the southern slopes of the Kentiai mountain range. Mongol Empire and Pax Mongolica. The 1228 Congress of Nobility known as Kurultai enthroned Ogdi, who had been nominated by Genghis Khan. Ogdi Khan made Karakoram on the river Orkhon the capital of the Mongol Empire. Karakoram had been a military garrison of Genghis Khan since 1220. The existence of 12 Buddhist temples, 2 Muslim mosques and 1 Christian church in city Karakoram indicates the tolerance of the Mongols to all religions. The construction of the city was supervised by Ochajan, the youngest brother of Genghis Khan. Ogdi Khan established an effective postal yam system with well-organized posts, or tej. The system connected the various regions of the whole empire. Ogdi Khan settled down the rebellions in the countries conquered during his father and led an army himself to put down a revolt in Korea. Ogdi Khan completed the conquest of the Jin dynasty in 1231 to 1234. He sent princes headed by Batu, son of Zuki, to the west, and they conquered 14 principalities of Rus in 1236 to 1240, invaded the principalities of Poland, the kingdom of Hungary, Moravia, then part of the Holy Roman Empire, and the area of Moldavia in 1241 to 1242 and approached the Adriatic Sea. After his 16-year reign, Ogdi Khan died in 1241 under suspicious circumstances. A rivalry for the throne began between the faction of the houses of Zuki and Tului on one side and the faction of the houses of Shagatai and Ogdi on the other side. The Kurultai of 1246 elected Gayog, son of Ogdi, as Great Khan. Gayog Khan died in 1248. The traveler from Italy Giovanni de Pian del Carpine arrived in 1246 and later he wrote the book Historia Mongolorum quos nos Tartaros Apellimus. The faction of Zuki Tului houses won the Kurultai of 1251 electing Mung, son of Tului, as Great Khan. Mung Khan sent his second younger brother Hulagu to conquer Iran. Hulagu completed the conquest of Iran in 1256 and conquered Baghdad, Caucasus and Syria in 1257 to 1259. Willem van Roosbroek of Flanders arrived in 1254 and later wrote his account Itinerarium Fratris Williami de Verbruckis de Ordine Fratrum Minorum, Galli, Anno Gratia 1253 ad partes Orientals. Mung Khan died in 1259, without leaving behind a son. The Kurultai of 1260 elected Erik Bok, the youngest brother of Mung Khan, as Great Khan. The same year, Mung Khan's first younger brother Kublai, who was warring in China to conquer the Song dynasty, elevated himself into Great Khan in city Xanadu, or known as Kaiping. The Talyuid civil war was fought between the two brothers from 1261 to 1264 until Erik Bok surrendered. The Mongol Empire had an establishing effect on the social, cultural, and economic life of the inhabitants of the vast Eurasian territory in the 13th and 14th centuries. It enabled exchange of knowledge, inventions, and culture between the West and East. This epoch is called Pax Mongolica. In Mongolia, the legacy of Genghis Khan was a superior law code, a written language, and a historical pride. Fragmentation of the Mongol Empire and Yuan dynasty. The establishment of the Yuan dynasty, 1271 to 1368, by Kublai Khan accelerated the fragmentation of the Mongol Empire. The Mongol Empire fractured into 4 khanates, including the Yuan dynasty based in China, and the 3 western khanates, i.e. the Golden Horde, the Chagatai Khanate and the Ilkhanate, although later Yuan emperors were seen as the nominal suzerains of the western khanates. The transition of the capital of the Mongol Empire from Karakoram to Kanbalik, Dadu, modern-day Beijing, by Kublai Khan in 1264 was opposed by many Mongols. Thus, Erik Bok's struggle was for keeping the center of the empire in Mongolia homeland. After Erik Bok's death, the struggle was continued by Kaidu, a grandson of Ogidi Khan and de facto ruler of the Chagatai Khanate until 1301 as well as Lord Nyan in 1287, although the Mongolian steppe was controlled by Kublai Khan and his successors after the Talyuid civil war. Kublai invited Lama Drogon Chogyal Phagpa of Sakya school of Tibetan Buddhism to spread Buddhism throughout his realm, the second introduction of Buddhism among the Mongols. Buddhism became the de facto state religion of the Mongol Yuan state. In 1269, Kublai Khan commissioned Phagpa Lama to design a new writing system to unify the writing systems of the multilingual empire. The Phagspa script, also known as the square script, was based on the Tibetan script and written vertically from top was designed to write in Mongolian, Tibetan, Chinese, Uyghur and Sanskrit languages and served as the official script of the empire. Kublai Khan announced the establishment of the Yuan dynasty in 1271. The Yuan dynasty included modern-day Mongolia, the territories of the former Jin and Song dynasties and some adjacent territories such as a major part of southern Siberia. Kublai established a government with institutions resembling the ones in earlier Chinese dynasties such as the Zhongshu Shang to lead the civil administration in the Yuan realm, yet at the same time introduced a hierarchy of reliability by dividing the subjects of the Yuan dynasty into 4 ranks. The highest rank included the Mongols, the second rank included the peoples to the west of Mongolia, the third rank included the subjects of the former Jin dynasty such as northern Chinese, the Khitans and Jurchens, and the lowest rank comprised the subjects of the former Song dynasty such as the Han ethnic group in South China. As for Mongolia itself, since the Mongolian plateau is where the ruling Mongols of the Yuan dynasty came from, it enjoyed a somewhat special status during the Mongol-led Yuan dynasty, although the capital of the dynasty had been moved from Karakoram to Kanbalik, modern Beijing, since the beginning of Kublai Khan's reign, and Mongolia had been turned into a province known as the Lingbei Branch Secretariat by the early 14th century. After the capture of the Yuan capital by the Ming dynasty founded by Han Chinese in 1368, the last Yuan emperor Togon Timur fled north to Xanadu, then to Ingchang and died there in 1370. The Mongols under his son and successor Bailig Khan Yasharidara retreated to the Mongolian steppe and fought against the Ming. The Mongolian steppe became the ruling center of the northern Yuan dynasty which would last till the 17th century. Northern Yuan and 4 Oirat. By 1368, the Mongols who established the Yuan dynasty a century ago had been expelled from China proper to the Mongolian plateau. The Dongxiangs, Bonans, Uyghur, and Mongol people came under rule of Han-led Ming dynasty. The rump state of the Yuan dynasty after this time until the 17th century is often referred to as the Northern Yuan dynasty, or the 40 and the 4, meaning the 42 Muns of the Mongols and the 4 Tumans of the Oirats. Bailig Khan Yasharidara was enthroned in 1370 after the death of the last Yuan emperor. The Ming dynasty founded by ethnic Han began aggressions against the Northern Yuan from the year 1372. Mongol warlord Kok Timur defeated a 150,000 Ming force on the river Orkhon in 1373. Ming army invaded the northern Yuan again in 1380 and looted Karakoram and other cities, but the invasions of the northern Yuan by Ming armies in 1381 and 1392 were expelled. Nevertheless, Yuan royalists in Yunnan had surrendered to the Ming dynasty by the early 1380s. Nagachu, a Mongol commander of Ayasharidara in Liaoyang province, invaded Liaodong with aims of restoring the Yuan dynasty. However, he, along with his troops, size about 200,000, finally surrendered to the Ming dynasty in 1387-88 after a successful diplomacy of the latter. 25. In 1388, the Ming dynasty achieved a decisive victory around Bir Lake against Uskal Khan Togas Timur. 26. The defeat of Uskal Khan effectively shattered Yuan power in the steppes and allowed the western Oirat Mongols to rise and become the kingmakers of the northern Yuan realm. 27. In 1388, the Mongol throne was taken over by Jaraitu Khan Yusudar, a descendant of Erik Bok, with the support of the Oirats. He abolished the Han-style title of the former northern Yuan dynasty. 28, 29, and 30. The Ming dynasty sent Kafuz cavalry into Mongolia, but was chased out by Bayantri Khan, 1405 to 1412. In response, the Yongle emperor of the Ming dynasty personally invaded the northern Yuan in 1409, 1414, 1422, 1423, and 1424. Mongols remained powerful even after the fall of the Yuan dynasty, but the number of the Mongols decreased due to the fall of the Mongol Empire, wars, and assimilation, Turkization. As the Ming dynasty understood its own disability of conquering the Mongolian plateau by military force, it started a policy of provoking the groups of Mongols to quarrel with one another, as well as economic blockade. 31. A long period of feudal separatism and rivalry for the Khan's throne started in Mongolia by the early 15th century. The military strength of the Mongols during the Yuan dynasty was that they were able to mobilize an army of 400,000 warriors, 42 Muns. Assuming that an average household consisted of 4 people and every adult man was a warrior, it can be estimated that the Mongol population in the Yuan dynasty counted at least 1,600,000 people. However, the amount of 42 Muns remained only in the name of the Mongols after the fall of the Yuan dynasty, as only 6 Tumans were able to retreat to Mongolia and the remaining 34 Tumans were lost to the Ming dynasty. These 6 Tumans were grouped into the 3 Tumans of the left wing ruled by the Mongol Khan and the 3 Tumans of the right wing ruled by Jinong, vassal of the Khan. There were about 250,000 Mongols staying in South China, and many of these Mongols who were unable to retreat to Mongolia were killed by the Chinese. 32. The Oirats constituted another 4 Tumans. They stayed in Mongolia proper during the Yuan dynasty and sided Erik Bok, Kaidu, and Nyan in their anti-Kublai struggle. By the 15th century, the Oirats occupied the Altai Mountains region. The Oirats were ruled by a Taishar who was a vassal of the Khan. The first half of the 15th century saw a rivalry of Oirat Taishis for the throne of the Khan, and the second half of the 15th century saw a separatist movement of the Taishis in the right-wing Tumans. In the late 14th century, Mongolia was divided into 2 parts: Western Mongolia, Oirats, and Eastern Mongolia, Khalkha, Southern Mongols, Barga, Buryats. Western Mongolian Oirats and Eastern Mongolian Khalkhas vied for—
Alright, that's enough of that. Mongolia, Schmongolia.
Good one.
April Fools again, I really am gonna list the 10 best waifus. Furthermore, I will do so while doing nearly the impossible. I am only going to allow waifus who are legal adults. According to Google anyway. Look, I get it, these drawings of teenagers are often very sexualized. Or a code sheet. And if I were a teenager still, then I'd totally allow it. However, I am, at least physically, a grown adult man who isn't a billionaire, so I personally don't find high school students or characters like this to be great waifu candidates. Also, I'm limiting it to 1 character per franchise for variety's sake. Besides that, there are no real rules or regulations here. If it's an anime or manga woman, she's eligible for the list. Also, spoiler alert for the shows in the description. Oh, y'all thought I was just gonna list mainstream queens, didn't ya? Nah, believe it or not, I have some ball knowledge. I will admit it, I love romance anime. I see a movie like The Notebook, and I don't really care. But I watch shows like Horimiya and Blue Box with my feet up in the air, catching my single ass smiling. I thought when I watched this new show that I found a low-key masterpiece. A great cast of characters, an entertaining premise with a unique twist on typical anime romance, and an adult couple that is the perfect blend of smart and fucking stupid.
About 24 seconds, which means the angular velocity omega is about pi/6.
And distance traveled in one revolution of the merry-go-round would be about 22 meters.
The value of mRw squared.
Then I finished Season 2.
I have a question for God. Why?
Holy fumble! Spoiler alert, but why the fuck did this show become a harem?
In that case,
Someone's in love, and it's with you.
didn't you already tell?
Not me, Kanade.
What?
Like, ignore the insane tone shift with the last episodes being about Kanade almost getting raped. But why the fuck is she in love with Yukimura? What the... Alright, I'm here to rank Ayame Kimuro. Sorry, the Season 2 ending pisses me off, and I don't know when I'll be able to talk about it again. Anyway, yeah, she's hot as shit. And she's smart too. That's what I care about the most. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. For real though, she's driven, intelligent, and unlike Yukimura, isn't full-blown Sheldon Cooper socially inept. I want to keep it real. We wouldn't have much to talk about, but even if she rejected me with a PowerPoint, I'd watch her presentation with cartoonish hard eyes. And a bone. From sleeper pick to basic bitch option. Don't hate the popular kid for being popular. Hinata is an S-tier waifu. Have you seen her in the last? That's what I thought. There's also the fact that she is intelligent and strives to better herself. Her fight against Neji already proved she had that dog in her. But the most impressive thing, though, is that she literally fought this motherfucker purely for the sake of love. She was a teenage girl who saw God nuke her whole village and still pulled up because her ride or die needed an assist. That is pure, unadulterated loyalty right there. Hinata, like most shinobi, can also presumably use the transformation jutsu, so she's kinda got the ability to be any waifu. I'm sure she could also learn to do the clone jutsu if she doesn't know it already. The only reason she's this low is because she's kinda lame in Boruto. I like to pretend Boruto never happened, but I can't unsee this. Everyone's saying, Naruto is nerfed, Sasuke is nerfed, but never calling out the greatest Boruto injustice of all. Removing my anime titties, no! What woman is your type? If this absolute queen asked me this question, I'd take my schizophrenia medication again, because drawings shouldn't talk, right? But seriously, she is proof that Geto is gay for Gojo, because if I were in Geto's position when they had their conversation, two things would have occurred. One, all genocidal and depressive thoughts would have left my brain and been replaced by love for this goddess. And two, okay, that's only number 8. I really gotta relax. I like that Yuki is more perceptive and emotionally aware than she appears, being the first to really recognize Geto's fucked up mental state. She's also strong as hell and tall, which are both obvious benefits. She's obviously super hot as well, but Me saying that is already getting kind of redundant for this whole list. The best waifu point I have for her is that she trained and molded Toto, arguably the most goated character in JJK, with the sole exception of Satoru Gojo, of course. Think about it. If I had a son or daughter with her, just her being the mom could guarantee me a son or daughter as based and capable as Toto. Granted, Toto also has a high IQ, so with half my genes, this kid could just end up retarded still, but who knows? Also, I reckon she'd be so much fun to just hang out with. Who here would you want to get a drink with? That's what I thought. Case closed. This one is the most obvious Gooner bait on this list.
That's pretty good.
I'm not going to deny it, this pick is like 75% physical attraction. But tell me that's wrong. Hell's Paradise actually has great waifu options, but Yuzuriha is cool, hot, smart, hot, has a signature ability that literally covers her in white liquid, is hot. Oh, and did I mention that she's attractive? Look, she literally tries to seduce people in the show. She's 100% aware of how she looks. Why else would Gabimaru be fully covered, but her ninja outfit features prominent side boobage? Even her change of clothes just happens to have visible cleavage that would probably make Power Girl raise an eyebrow. I'm not proud that I fell for her charms, but come on. Even the Blade Dragon can't stop himself. He's just like me! Literally, look at her. She's fighting a godlike dude and still posing like this?
I guess.
I wanna switch! I wanna switch! I wanna switch! You never see it coming.
If you've been watching my videos for a minute, then you'll have seen this name pop up on occasion. What is Ryan? He's dumb, stupid, 5 feet and 11 inches tall, with a tad of fucking moronic mixed in there as well. However, once in a blue moon, Ryan will actually say something smart, and maybe the most genius thing he has ever said to me was to watch Frieren. Holy peak! This show is so goated. Brilliant characters, thoughtful writing, heartfelt messages, and some of the most beautiful animation I've ever seen. Then I watched the show in dub to piss Ryan off. I normally don't watch the dub, but for Frieren I do for one other reason as well.
You were exceptional. That was quite the show.
Look, call me a gooner all you want. I don't care. I've heard enough adult women sounding like squeaky little girls. It's nice to hear something different. There are multiple reasons Frieren is great waifu material. She's so chill and loves to touch grass, which, contrary to what this video would suggest, I actually enjoy doing as well.
I love going outside and touching grass.
Stop flying!
Plus, she's magic. Do I need to explain why that is so fantastic?
Honey, where are my pants? Is filmed in front of a live studio audience. Honey, where are my pants? Thanks. Do you have a spell that can fix my micro penis?
Kill yourself.
Frieren is also really funny. Like, I don't think she's intentionally very funny, but her weird antics would amuse me for my entire life. Another bonus, she would 100% outlive me, so I wouldn't have to risk losing my waifu one day and going through that grief. There's only one downside. I don't really find her super attractive. Honestly, the voice low-key caring for this one a little. Still, think about how many sexless marriages are out there today. And lots of those turn out kind of okay. Even the goat, Himmel, never clapped elf cheeks, to my knowledge anyway. And he still died loving this lady. And Himmel is a far greater and more noble soul than I. So who am I to deny Frieren's status as prime waifu material? Weird though, because elves are normally way more attractive because they're so exotic. Wait, is that racist? Let's double check by swapping elves with a different race in that previous sentence. Weird though, because black people are normally way more attractive. Yeah, no, seems dicey. Let's move on. I just checked the script for this entry, and I just wrote "step on me" underneath Cynthia. Enough said. Alright, look, what do you want from me? Not only is she tall, blonde, and beautiful, but she's like the strongest Pokemon trainer. That's so cool! As a resident Platinum kid and Gen 4 supremacist, I can't ignore my bias. She's hands down the coolest champion, and has the most aura in the whole Pokemon game series. Don't believe me? Listen to this. So you just shot yourself slightly, didn't you? Don't lie. I can smell it. Go change them draws. Cynthia is an S-tier waifu. I will hear no counter-arguments, or quite frankly, any other opinions. I am objectively correct. You know, this is the first time I'm talking about Blue Lock on this channel. And quite frankly, I can't think of a better reason than to discuss how incredibly, stupendously hot Henri is. I am convinced that Henri was included in the story just to break up the absolute sausage fest that this manga is. Literally, I have like 2 other options for Blue Lock waifus. Thankfully, Henri is holding this fort down. The first scene we see Henri in, other characters immediately begin commenting on her enormous yayas. As a 6-foot-tall feminist ally myself, oh am I kidding, there's no women watching this. Jokes aside, look at this. This official manga artwork isn't even in the story, it's just pure fan service. They know exactly what they're doing. Even her behavior is designed to be Div 1 waifuing. She literally cooks and cleans for a degenerate, skinny, probably kinda stinky, egotistical weirdo who probs has autism. That's literally me! She's also redheaded, which IRL is normally a coin toss, but in fictional media, redheads are gorgeous 9 times out of 10. I'm looking at you, Kyle's mom. Henri may be complete waifu bait, but honestly... worth it. Psych! Fuck that show, and fuck you, Ryan, for suggesting it. That almost undoes Frieren, you prick. The Cafe Terrace and its goddesses is the only harem manga I have read, and it will be the only one I ever read. I possess a 100% win rate, bitches! Best girl Akane wins. Woo! Here's why Akane is a goated waifu. She's talented at making coffee, which I don't even drink coffee, but, you know, it's a talent. Singing, and playing guitar. I like to play guitar too, so that's something we have in common. It only took 7 entries, but I included a woman who I have any common interest with. Akane comes from a wealthy family, bonus points.
Hello, I like money.
Goes for what she wants, and most importantly, is canonically down for orgies.
Stand up now and face the sun. Won't hide my tail or turn it red. It's time to do what must be done.
I don't know what else you could want. She's chill and down to have 5-sims with you. Isn't that the dream woman?
You never see it come.
See? I included you, okay? Don't get all jealous on me, babe. Come on. You know you're the only waifu who has
Total dominion over my entire being.
what to say about Makima. For starters, look at her. Just like Henri, Makima proves that redheads may actually be the most attractive anime waifu material. She also proves that redheads do in fact lack souls. I'm not completely blinded by desire here. I'm aware of how manipulative, controlling, and loveless she is. It's literally her nature. It's like saying Mahito is a dick. She can't help it. But I've always wanted what I can't have, which actually applies to all of these. But generally speaking, women out of my league, women who don't physically exist. Subscribers to the channel. I'm drawn to all of these things because I know I can't have them. Maybe my ego is just fuck you whipped. I'm not sure. Makima is the pinnacle of it's all about the chase. Because the second you actually get her, your life is ruined. I'll bark for her whenever she asks, but the second she says, let's get it on, I might have to run for my life. Now that I think about it, can she even have sex? The Death Devil has weird anatomy down there, so Makima is maybe the same? I don't know, I've just got this pillow. Side note, I really never intended for this Makima body pillow thing to go on so long. I don't know how it became the centerpiece of my channel's continuity, but it's too late now. Maybe she's been in control this entire time.
You never see it coming.
One Piece is my favorite story of all time, but I'm not gonna hold you. This show might be the cornucopia of fan service. Almost every One Piece female could look at an actual hourglass, tell said hourglass that it looks fat, and make that poor hourglass bulimic. There are so many options for One Piece waifus. Vivi, Hancock, Tashigi, Nami, Viola, Reiju, Perona. Hell, even Branch must secretly be a coconut tree, cause goddamn! So why, with all of these options, did I pick Nico Robin? Well, purely for her personality, of course. Robin is highly intelligent and incredibly chill. She spends most of her time just reading, and she enjoys history. I can totally relate to this because I just recently finished Homer's The Iliad. What's that? It's just... Man, he was annoying. Robin just seems like she'd be fun to hang around. She's almost never stressing in dire situations, and she's very handy. Get it? Ah! Okay, hopefully he stays down. For real though, on top of how beautiful she is, and the fact that she's got a bit of an edge to her, as seen with these morbid thoughts she has and her checkered past, her devil fruit also has obvious benefits to an aspiring waifu. I'm not going to go into detail. Yes, we have all seen the Rule 34 of Nico Robin.
Stop lying to me!
There's a reason Nico Robin is so popular as a One Piece waifu. She just has a lot going for her. There's even the devil form. Still though, I will say pre-time skip Robin is better in my opinion. I preferred when she had some melanin and regular-sized poneglyphs. But she did spend her 2-year time skip learning slapping techniques to spank the fuck out of me. But pre-time skip did CBT on Frankie. It's just too hard. I don't know which version is better. Psych! April Fools again, you buffoons! The real best waifu is Zoro.
Hell no, man. What the fuck?
He got a bigger chest than Nami and Robin. The only one getting lost here is me. Getting lost in his beautiful eye. Woo! Let's see the legendary mythical supreme great fourth sword!
Domination in Mongolia since the 14th century, and this conflict weakened Mongolian strength. In 1434, Eastern Mongolian Tai Sun Khans, 1433 to 1452, Prime Minister Western Mongolian Tagun Taesh reunited the Mongols after killing Eastern Mongolian another king Adai, Korchin. Tagun died in 1439, and his son Izan Taesh became prime minister. Tagun Taishur of Oirat eventually increased his power in the northern Yuan court, and these achievements were tightened under his successor Izan Taishur. Mongolia was effectively unified under the power of the Oirat Taishur. Izan Taishur led active diplomatic exchanges with the Ming dynasty to achieve favorable trading conditions. When diplomacy failed to reach the goal, he led a military campaign in 1449, in which a 500,000 Ming army was defeated by a 20,000 Oirat army. The Zhengtong emperor was captured and Beijing was besieged. However, soon after, Izan Taishur was defeated by the Ming dynasty in the Battle of Beijing. Following his defeat, Izan Taishur was expelled beyond the Great Wall and released the Zhengtong emperor. 33. Shortly after this event, Izan Taishur defeated the nominal Khan Togtobu in their conflict and became a self-declared Khan. During his retreat, Togtobu was caught and assassinated by his ex-father-in-law for an earlier humiliation of his daughter as she was divorced and returned to her parents. The reign of Izan Taishur was short, less than a year. His rivals rebelled and overthrew him in 1454. The Khalkha emerged during the reign of Dayan Khan, 1479 to 1543, as one of the 6 Tumans of the Eastern Mongolic peoples. They quickly became the dominant Mongolic clan in Mongolia proper. 34, 35. Mongolia was once again unified under Queen Mandukai the Wise and Batmonk Dayan Khan, who subdued the Taishis. Queen Manduhai defeated the Oirats when Batmonk was still a child. Later Batmonk subdued the Taishis of the right wings as they refused to accept a suzerain over them, son of Dayan Khan sent there as a Jinong. After this event, Batmonk moved his residence from Khalkha to Cheharia, to a proxim neighborhood to the right wings for tighter control over them. Since then, the Mongol Khans resided in Cheharia up to 1634. The left-wing Tumans under Dayan Khan were Khalkha, Cheharia, and Urianhai, and the right-wing Tumans were Ordos/Tumd, Yanchiabu, and Karchin/Korchin. Dayan Khan was succeeded by Bodhi Ulug Khan, whose power was however assumed by his uncle Bars Bolid Jinong as a regent due to the Khan's young age. As he grew up, Bodhi Ulug claimed back his throne and the Jinong yielded. The Mongols voluntarily reunified during Eastern Mongolian Tuman Zasid Khan rule, 1558 to 1592, for last time after the Mongol Empire. During the reign of Darayasun Goding Khan and his successor Tuman Jasagda Khan, the right wings rose in the 16th century under a local Lord Altan, son of Bars Bolid Jinong, who assumed the title of Khan. In order to maintain the unity of the country by peaceful means, Tuman Jasagda Khan initiated a representative government with equal participation of the representatives of the left and right wings. The right wings rivaled with the Oirats for possession of Upper Mongolia, Qinghai, and Altan Khan, who appointed his son as a ruler of Upper Mongolia, Kukuner, defeated the Oirats in 1552. Altan Khan attacked the Ming dynasty, but he stopped the raids in 1571 and signed a peace treaty with the Ming court. To achieve favorable conditions in the peace treaty with the Ming dynasty, Altan Khan occasionally threatened that he may ally with Tumen Khan to attack the Ming dynasty. Altan Khan established the city of Hohhot in 1557. Hututai Sis and Hongtaiji of Ordos defeated the Torguts at the river Tish around the 1560s. Abtai Khan, the ruler of Khalkha, conquered the Oirats in the 1570s, but the latter rebelled in 1588. The Oirats, in turn, were busy in struggle with Mogolistan for trade routes. Tumen Jasagta Khan was succeeded by Bayan Sechin Khan, who claimed having possessed the seal of the ancient Taizong Khan. Bayan's grandson Ligdan ascended the throne in 1603. He initiated translation of major Buddhist scriptures into the Mongolian language. By his time, the authority of the northern Yuan Khan had declined to such a degree that Legdan Hututu Khan came to be known as Khan of Teheria. The failure of his attempts of unification of Mongolia by peaceful means led him to shift to forceful methods. However, this in turn alienated the local lords of Inner Mongolia from him even farther. The striving of the Mongols to improve their life led naturally to an increase in the number of their livestock. In the extensive livestock husbandry, on which the medieval Mongolian economy was based, an excess number of livestock required either expansion of the pastures, which may imply conquest of new territories, or exchange of the excess animals and livestock products for products of settled civilizations unavailable in the unsophisticated Mongolian economy. For example, they would be able to wear clothes made of hides and wool in cold seasons, but would certainly need clothes from silk or light fabric in summer. However, the ban on trade with the Mongols by the Ming administration was a reason for armed conflicts. Moreover, there were frequent attempts to offer low prices for the livestock products or to supply low-quality reject goods to the Mongols. Thus, in protest, there were cases that Mongol traders burned their reject Chinese purchases in front of the Ming officials during the rule of Izan. Also, the Ming administration often issued extremely low import quotas for trade. They banned selling metal products to the Mongols in suspicion that metal would be remolded into weapons. However, metal products such as kettles were vitally important in the everyday life of the herders. Cities in Mongolia were completely destroyed during Chinese raids in the late 14th and early 15th centuries. The Ming Empire attempted to invade Mongolia in the 14-16th centuries. However, the Ming Empire was defeated by the Oirat, Southern Mongol, Eastern Mongol, and United Mongolian armies, 31. Thus, there was no division of labor between urban and rural economies that was characteristic in other cultures. Some attempts of diversification of the economy were undertaken in the 16th and 17th centuries in peripheral Mongol domains, but not in northern Khalkha. Thus, Altan Khan made Chinese grow grain around the city of Hohhot. Erdini Badr Hongtaiji attempted to develop cereal and horticulture production in Zungaria using imported Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, Chinese, and Tarankis, 36. However, these initiatives mainly or exclusively served the ruling classes, and the mass of the Mongol commoners received little or no benefit from them. By the end of the 16th century, several Khanlig dynasties developed in Khalkha. As Dayan Khan divided Mongolia among his 11 sons, northern Khalkha, approximately the territory of modern Mongolia, was given to his youngest son Jersens Hongtaiji, and southern Khalkha was given to Alkibalad. Northern Khalkha was further divided among Jersens' 7 sons and their sons. Abtai, the most powerful of Jersens' grandchildren, received the title of Khan from the Dalai Lama, and his son Aryehei Mergan Khan founded the dynasty of the Tushieta Khans, who ruled the central heartland of northern Khalkha. Jersens' great-grandson Sholoi solicited the title of Khan from Dalai Lama during his visit to Tibet and initiated the dynasty of Sisan Khans in the east of Khalkha. Another great-grandson of Jersens Leher assumed the title of Khan, and his son Sumadai founded the dynasty of the Zasagta Khans, ruling the west of northern Khalkha. Leher's cousin Ubashi Hongtaiji separated from the Zasagta Khan and initiated the dynasty of Altan Khans of Kotgoid. The title Altan Khan was given to him by the Russian authorities. In the beginning of the 17th century, the Koshat tribe of Oirat migrated to Kukunar, and Torguts migrated to the basin of the river Volga, becoming the Kalmyk people. Kurakula of the Choros clan unified the Oirats by the 1630s, and his son Erdini Badr Hongtaiji established the Dzungar Khanate in 1634. The title of Hongtaiji was given to him by the Dalai Lama. The third introduction of Buddhism. Hututai Sis and Hongtaiji of Ordos and his 2 brothers invaded Tibet in 1566. He sent an ultimatum to some of the ruling clergy of Tibet demanding their submission. 37. The Tibetan supreme monks decided to surrender, and Hututai Sis and Hongtaiji returned to Ordos with 3 high-ranking monks. Tumen Jasagta Khan invited a monk of the Kagyu school in 1576, citation needed. Following the advice of his nephew Hututai Sis and Hongtaiji, Altan Khan of Tumut invited the head of the Galug school Sonam Gyatso to his domain. Upon their meeting in 1577, Altan Khan recognized Sonam Gyatso Lama as a reincarnation of Phagpa Lama. Sonam Gyatso, in turn, recognized Altan as a reincarnation of Kublai Khan, 38, citation needed. Thus, Altan added legitimacy to the title Khan that he had assumed, while Sonam Gyatso received support for the supremacy he sought over the Tibetan Sangha. Since this meeting, the heads of the Jalugpa school became known as Dalai Lamas. Altan Khan also bestowed the title Akardara, from Sanskrit Vajradhara, to Sonam Gyatso. At the same time, the ruler of Khalkha Abtai rushed to Tumut to meet the new Dalai Lama. He requested the title Khan from him. Although the new Dalai Lama had already recognized Altan as a Khan in addition to the extant Mongolian Khan Tumen Jasatu, the Dalai Lama in Abtai's case rejected the request with the excuse that there cannot be 2 Khans at the same time. After some hesitation, however, he did give Abtai the title Khan. Abtai Khan established the Erdenzhou monastery in 1585 at the site of the former city of Karakoram, 39, citation needed. Thus, eventually most Mongolian rulers became Buddhists. Cultural Renaissance. The second half of the 15th and the 16th centuries saw the revival and flourishing of Mongolian culture. This period is characterized by development of architecture, fine arts including silk applique, thenka, martang, and nagtang painting, and sculpture. An adopted son of Oirat aristocrat Babagas, Zaya Pandita Namhejamso, 1599-1662, reformed the Mongolian script, adapting it to the Oirat dialect. This new script is called Tudu Bichig. Zanabazar, 1635-1723, head of Buddhism in Khalkha, was a great master of the Buddhist art. Along with the sculptures of the 21 Terras, he created the famous sculptures of Sita Terra and Sayama Terra, inspired by lively images of beautiful Mongolian women. The lotus flower over the left shoulder of Sita Terra is about to blossom, and Sita Terra herself is in her mid-teens. The lotus flowers over the shoulders of Sayama Terra have already blossomed, and Sayama Terra herself is a woman in the bloom of her beauty. She is aware and proud of her perfect beauty. She has awakened from her meditation, put down her right leg in the moment of standing up to descend from her lotus seat to breastfeed her child, and her children are the sentient beings. Many temples and monasteries were built under Zanabazar's projects. He designed the Soyombo script for the Mongolian, Tibetan, and Sanskrit languages in 1686. Mathematician and astronomer Mingatu of Sharaid discovered 9 trigonometric equations and wrote 42 volumes of the roots of regularites, VV, 5 volumes in linguistics, and 53 volumes of work on mathematics. 40. In the area of historiography and literature, the Shiratuji was written in the 16th century, the Altan Topchi of Lubsandanzan was written in the first half of the 17th century, and the Erdenian Topchi of Sagan Sis and Hongtaiji, a descendant of Hututai Sis and Hongtaiji, was written in 1662. In the 1620s, Tsogta Hongtaiji of Khalkha wrote his famous philosophic poems, and Legdan Hututu Khan had the 108 volumes of Kangyur and 225 volumes of Tenjir translated into the Mongolian language. A translation theory work, The Source of Wisdom, was written under leadership of Rabia Dorji, Janja Hututu II. Qing Dynasty. In the early 17th century, the northern Yuan dynasty was divided into 3 parts, the Khalkha, Inner Mongols, and Buryats. By the end of the 17th century, the power of the all-Mongolian Khan had greatly weakened and the decentralized Mongols had to face the rising new Jurchen statehood on the east. The last Mongol Khagan was Ligdan Khan in the early 17th century. He got into conflicts with the Manchus over the looting of Chinese cities, and managed to alienate most Mongol tribes. In 1618, Ligdan signed a treaty with the Ming dynasty to protect their northern border from the Manchus' attack in exchange for thousands of taels of silver. Nurhasai Bagatur, who reunified the Jurchen tribes, sent a letter to Ligdan Khan seeking alliance in fighting against the Ming dynasty. Ligdan denied the proposal, mentioning that Nurhasai rules only 3 tumans of the Jurchens, while Ligdan himself is a Jenghisid ruling the 40 tumans of the Mongols, and that Nurhasai had better refrain from disturbing the Chinese cities tributaries of him of Ligdan Khan. In response, Nurhasai held it necessary to remind him that the 40 tumans are long gone and there are perhaps some 6 tumans of which only Teheria recognizes Ligdan's power as Khan. Later Nurhasai managed to ally with the vassals of Ligdan Khan, the Taijis or princes of southern Khalkha, Horchen, Horlos, etc., who pledged to support Nurhasai in his wars against the Ming dynasty. However, their first allied actions were against their own suzerain Ligdan Khan, who they defeated in 1622. By the 1620s, only the Chahars remained under Ligdan's rule. The Chahar army was defeated in 1625 and 1628 by the Inner Mongol and Manchu armies due to Ligdan's faulty tactics. Ligdan Khan occupied Tumut and Ordos in 1623 to forestall their absorption by the Manchu and advanced into the Manchurian lands in 1631. Nevertheless, Manchu ruler Hong Taiji, successor of Nurhasai, allied with the Inner Mongolian Taijis, defeated him again in 1634 and sacked Hohhot. The Manchus secured control over Inner Mongolia in 1632 and Ligdan's army moved to fight Tibetan Gelugpa sect, Yellow Hat sect, forces. The Gelugpa forces supported the Manchus, while Ligdan supported the Kagyu sect, Red Hat sect, of Tibetan Buddhism. Ligdan Khan died in 1634 on his way to Tibet when his troops were swept by an epidemic. Hong Taiji assumed the title of Khan of the Mongols in 1636, marking the conquest of Inner Mongolia. The Qing dynasty, supported by the troops of the Inner Mongolian Taijis, conquered Ming dynasty in 1644. Erdeni Batur Hong Taiji of the Dzungar Khanate convened a congress of Western Mongolian Dzungars and Khalkhas in 1640 to ally their forces in struggle against increasing foreign aggression. The Congress issued a Khalkha law called the Great Code of the 40 and the 4 or Mongol Code, Dachin Dorban Hoyer on Iktsagaza. The Congress was attended by 28 rulers from Dzungaria, Khalkha, Kukunar, and Kalmykia. Tushi Yeta Khan Gambadorji and Sisan Khan Sholoi were engaged in a conflict with the Manchu Qing dynasty siding with Tengiz Taiji of Inner Mongolia who revolted against Qing rule in 1646. Chahandorji succeeded to Tushi Yeta Khan's Tushit Khan, throne in 1665. Zasakta Khan Norvo died in 1661 and rivalry started between his successors. This feud eventually involved Altan Khan, Tushi Yeta Khan, and the Dzungar Khanate. The crisis continued for decades and evolved into a war between Khalkha and Dzungaria in 1688, leading to the conquest of Khalkha by Galdan Bashag Khan, king of the Dzungar Khanate, in the course of several battles in the Hongai Mountains. In 1688, Galdan attacked Khalkha following the murder of his younger brother by Tushit Khan Chakhunderj, the main or central Khalkha leader, and the Khalkha War began. The head of the Khalkha Buddhism Bogda Zanabazar, the Khalkha Khans and nobles with thousands of their subjects moved in panic to Inner Mongolia, which had been integrated into the Qing dynasty. A few Khalkhas fled north of Outer Mongolia where Russia threatened to exterminate them if they failed to submit, but many submitted to Galdan Bashag II. The Khalkha leader sought Manchu aid in their feud with Galdan Bashag Khan while the Kangxi emperor of the Qing dynasty cunningly demanded that they become his vassals as a condition for his support. Galdan demanded that the Kangxi emperor cede him under Jajin Zanagazar and Tushiyeta Khan Chahandorji. The Kangxi emperor refused and decisive battle took place near Longduden where Galdan was defeated and fled back deeper into Khalkha territory. The Dzungar throne was then seized by Galdan's brother, Sewang Rabdan in 1689 while the latter was engaged in the war in Khalkha and this event made it impossible for Galdan to fight the Qing Empire. Galdan sent his army to liberate Inner Mongolia after defeating the Khalkha army and called Inner Mongolian nobles to fight for Mongolian independence. Some Inner Mongolian nobles, Tibetans, Kumul Khanate and some Mogulistans nobles supported his war against the Qing Empire. However, Inner Mongolian nobles did not join the battle against the Manchus. The Kangxi emperor organized a congress of the rulers of Khalkha and Inner Mongolia in Dalnar in 1691 at which the Khalkha feudatories, the Khalkha Khanate or Eastern Mongolia, by Zanabazar's decision formally declared allegiance to the emperor. However, Khalkha de facto remained under the rule of Galdan Bashag Khan. Chakhunderj fought against the Russian invasion of northern Mongolia until 1688. Zanabazar struggled to bring together the Oirats and Khalkhas before the war. Qing forces invaded Khalkha in 1696 and the Oirats were defeated by the outnumbering enemy in a battle at Zunmad at the river Terralj. Galdan Bashag Khan died in 1697 in the region of Kavt. There were 3 Khans in Khalkha of which Zasaj Khan Shar, western Khalkha leader, was Galdan's ally. Setsen Khan, eastern Khalkha leader, did not engage in this conflict. The Mongols who fled to outer and inner Mongolia returned after the war. Some Khalkhas mixed with the Buryats. Sewang Rabdan continued the war against the Manchus to liberate eastern, upper and inner Mongolia after Galdan Bashag II. However, his action against Galdan made northern Mongols fight against Russia without the help of other Mongols. The Russian and Qing empires supported his actions because this coup weakened western Mongolian strength. 41. Mongolia encountered Russian expansion on her northern border in the 17th century. The Buryats had fought against Russian invasion since the 1620s. The well-armed Russian Cossacks cruelly subdued the resistance of the Buryats and conquered the Baikal region in 1640-1650s. The uprisings of the Buryats were brutally crushed in 1658 and 1696. The Russians attempted to build Ostrogs in Kosgal area, but they were quickly destroyed by the local population. The Buryat region was formally annexed to Russia by treaties in 1689 and 1727, when the territories on both the sides of Lake Baikal were separated from Mongolia. In 1689, the Treaty of Nerchinsk established the northern border of Manchuria north of the present line. The Russians retained Transbaikalia between Lake Baikal and the Argun River north of Mongolia. The Treaty of Kyakhta, 1727, along with the Treaty of Nerchinsk, regulated the relations between Imperial Russia and the Qing Empire until the mid-19th century. It established the northern border of Mongolia. Oka Buryats revolted in 1767 and Russia completely conquered the Buryat region in the late 18th century. 42. Tezwang Rabdan stopped the eastern expansion of the Kazakh Khans, and also sent his general Ihe Sarandondov to conquer Tibet in 1716. His force was driven out by Qing troops in 1720, who then occupied Tibet. However, several attempts by the Qing dynasty to subjugate the Dzungar Khanate failed in the early 18th century. In 1723, the Qing troops subdued the uprising of Lovsandans and Taiji in Kukunar. Sewang Rabdan was succeeded by his son Galdan Saran in 1727. Galdan Saran took a series of actions to develop crop production, gardening, and cannon manufacture in Dzungaria. He successfully repelled the aggression of the Qing dynasty in 1729-31. Moreover, his general Bhagat Sarandondov advanced into Khalkha and reached the river Karelin in 1732, but had to retreat after battles with Khalkha and Qing troops. Galdan Saran died in 1745 and a crisis arose among his heirs. After a series of bloody clashes among them, Dawachi, supported by Koyoirat Prince Amersana, became the new Dzungar Khan in 1753. The feud was assigned to the Qing dynasty to prepare for the invasion of the Dzungar Khanate. As soon as he became Khan, Dawachi deprived his friend Amersana of his wife and then defeated him in a battle in 1754. Amersana sought an alliance with the Qing dynasty, hoping to defeat Dawachi and elevate himself to the position of Khan of the Dzungar Khanate. The Qing administration mobilized horses and other livestock of the Khalkha population for the Dzungar invasion. A 200,000-strong army consisting of Khalkha, Inner Mongolian, Manchu, and Chinese troops invaded Dzungaria in 1755. The vanguard of the Qing army was led by Amersana, King Chinganjav, and King Renchen Dorji of the Khalkhas. The Dzungar Khanate was conquered by the Manchus in 1755 to 1758 due to conflicts between their leaders and military commanders. While this horde entered the Ili River basin, Amersana captured Dawachi and handed him to the Manchu. This event marked the fall of the Dzungar Khanate, which had impeded Qing expansion into Central Asia for over a century. The Qianlong Emperor demobilized the army and envisaged a congress of Dzungar and other Mongol aristocrats to celebrate the incorporation of Dzungaria into the Qing Empire. Soon after the conquest of the Dzungar Khanate, Amersana, Chinganjav of Kodagoid and Inner Mongolian Korchan Wang Sevdenbaljar rose up against Qing domination. Some Inner Mongol and Khalkha nobles supported this uprising, but the second Jebsendamba Katutu and Tushieta Khan Yampel Dorji mysteriously died shortly afterwards. Chinganjav rose against Qing rule in 1756, abandoning his post and appealed to the other nobles of Khalkha to rise for independence. Around the same period, an uprising of Sevdenbaljar in Inner Mongolia was subdued. Sevdenbaljar was arrested before this uprising to prevent the Inner Mongols uniting their force. He planned to organize a congress of the Khalkha nobility to elect a future Khan of Mongolia. Chinganjav was supported by Bogda Jajin II, the Khans of the four Khalkha Imags, and other members of the nobility. However, the Qing court was able to capture Chinganjav before the uprising took its full swing. Chinganjav and his whole family were cruelly executed in 1757, and the Qing court decided that future Jebsendamba Katutus would be only found in Tibet, not in Mongolia. Rinchinder Zhuang, who allowed Amersana to abandon his post in the Qing army, was cruelly executed in Beijing. Amersana returned to Dzungaria with his 500 warriors as he was deceived in his hope to take the Dzungar throne with the support of the Qing Empire. A faction of the Oirat aristocrats elevated him as Khan of the Oirats in 1756. However, Amersana's followers lacked unity. The decisive battle took place at Sharbal in 1757 when 3,000 Oirat troops fought against a 4 times outnumbering enemy. After the 17-day battle, Amersana was defeated and fled to Tobolsk in Russia where he died, but the Dzungars continued their war against Manchu invasion until 1758. Brutally revenging the Oirat people for their love for freedom, the Qing army carried out the Dzungar genocide, killing every Oirat they met on their way in the territory of the Dzungar Khanate. Of the 600,000 Dzungar population, only 30,000 survived, 43. Some scholars estimate that about 80% of the Dzungar population were destroyed by a combination of warfare and disease during the Qing conquest of the Dzungar Khanate in 1755, 1758, 44. Mark Levine, a historian whose recent research interests focus on genocide, 45, has stated that the extermination of the Dzungars was arguably the 18th century genocide par excellence. 46. The territory of the Dzungar Khanate was then incorporated into the Qing Empire as Xinjiang, which later became a province. Mongolia under Qing rule. After seizing control of Outer Mongolia, the Qing government grouped Khalkha Koshans into 4 Imags, province to Sieta Khan Imag, Zasata Khan Imag, Sisan Khan Imag and Sain Noyan Khan Imag. In addition, the territories populated by Oirats in the Kabdo region were grouped into Togs Huleg Dalai Khan Imag and Anen Zareg Khan Imag. Imags were governed by Imag Congress Chagulkan comprising the lords of the Koshans. The Chagulkan Daruga, official presiding the Congress, was appointed from the Koshan lords by the Qing government. As vassals of Qing emperors, the Mongolian nobles, rulers of the Koshans, were expected to carry out military services commanding their troops in warfare, to personally attend the emperor in his hunting processions, 47, mobilize resources from the Koshan population and subdue local riots. Their services were generously awarded by the emperor, and those who performed exceptionally outstanding feats before the Qing emperor would occasionally be honored to marry a princess. Disobedience or failure to provide adequate service was severely punished, 47. The most heavy burden of the foreign exploitation was laid on the spine of the ordinary Mongolian laborers. They were impoverished during mobilization of horses and livestock products during preparation of the military campaign against the Dzungar Khanate. Besides, they had to serve as warriors themselves. Although the military feudal system of Mongolia of the pre-Qing epoch is considered to have been a class society in which an ordinary Mongol was expected to obey his feudal lord as a soldier obeys a commander, 43, it was during the Qing rule when serfdom was effectively introduced to the Mongolian society for the first time. There were 3 forms of serfdom: Albatu, state serfs; Kamjilga, personal serfs of Koshan rulers and of Taijis; and Shabi, serfs of Katutus, supreme clergy. To prevent assimilation of the Mongols, the Qing government tried to restrict travels of Han Chinese to Khalkha and to forbid cross-ethnic marriages between the Mongols and Han Chinese. In the later Qing period, however, the Qing policy changed with the new policies, Xianzhang, in the early 20th century, which called for the sinification of Mongolia through Han Chinese colonization. Modern period. Bogd Khanate, 1911 to 1919. The official name of the state was Ik Mongol Uls, meaning the Great Mongolian State. Yuan Shikai, the president of the newly formed Republic of China, considered the new republic to be the successor of the Qing and claimed Outer Mongolia as part of its territory, 48. This claim was legally provided for in the imperial edict of the abdication of the Qing emperor signed by the Empress Dowager Longyu on behalf of the 6-year-old Xiantong emperor. The continued territorial integrity of the lands of the 5 races, Manchu, Han, Mongol, Hui, and Tibetan into one great republic. Of China, 49 50, 51. The Provisional Constitution of the Republic of China adopted in 1912 specifically established frontier regions of the new republic, including Outer Mongolia, as integral parts of the state, 52. While the Qing referred to their state as Zhonghua, the term for China in modern Chinese, in official documents such as treaties, it implemented different ways of legitimization for different peoples in the Qing Empire, such as acting as Khantu. The Mongols. As a result, the Mongols considered themselves as subjects of the Qing state outside China or Kitai, and the position of Mongols was that their allegiance had been to the Qing monarch, not the Chinese state. When declaring its independence, the Mongolian government led by the Bogd Khan posited to Yuan Shikai that both Mongolia and China had been administered by the Manchus. But after the fall of the Manchu-led Qing dynasty in 1911, it was simply that the contract about their submission to the Manchus had become invalid. 53. Bogd Jijin was enthroned as Bogd Khan, Holy King, of Mongolia on December 29, 1911, and a new era name, Olane Orgigdegson, Gongdai, lit. Elevated by many, was declared. The Qing high official in Uliastai was deported on January 12, 1912 in the presence of 700 Mongolian warriors mobilized from Sain Noyan Khan Imag. Mongolian troops led by Damba Jansen, Jalama, Maxerjav, and the Manlabator Damdanshurin arrived in the Koth region in August 1912. After an intense attack supported by the local people, they captured the city of Kabdo during the night of August 20, 1912. At the same time, while many Mongol leaders outside Outer Mongolia sent statements to support Bogd Khan's call of Mongolian reunification, 54, in reality, however, most of them were too prudent or irresolute to attempt joining the Bogd Khan regime. 55, the Mongolian army took control of Khalkha and the Koth region, modern Ovs province, Koth province, and Bayanalgi province, but northern Xinjiang, the Altai and Ili regions of the Qing Empire, Upper Mongolia, Barga, and Inner Mongolia came under control of the Republic of China. On February 2, 1913, the Bogd sent Mongolian cavalrymen to liberate Inner Mongolia from China. The Russian Empire refused to sell weapons to the Bogd Khanate, and Tsar Nicholas II called it Mongolian imperialism. 56. The United Kingdom urged Russia to abolish Mongolian independence because it was concerned that if Mongolians gain independence then Central Asians will revolt. 56. 10,000 Khalkha-Mongolian and Inner Mongolian cavalry, about 3,500 Inner Mongols, defeated 70,000 Chinese soldiers and controlled almost all of Inner Mongolia, but in 1914 the Mongolian army retreated due to lack of weapons. 400 Mongol soldiers and 3,795 Chinese soldiers died in this war. The Barga Mongols fought against Chinese forces in August 1912, captured the city of Hylar, and announced their willingness to unify with the Bogd Khanate. In its historical significance, the establishment of the Bogd Khanate of Mongolia is comparable with the foundation of the unified Mongol Empire in 1206. With national independence, Mongolia entered the path of modernization. A parliamentary structure consisting of two chambers, the Upper Hural and the Lower Hural, was formed in 1914. A legal code, Jarligar Togtagasin Mongol Wulus on Hali Zolan Bichig, or Zarligar Togtusin Mongol Olsen Koli Zuilian Bichig, was adopted in 1915. On November 3, 1912, the Russian Empire and Mongolia signed a bilateral treaty without the participation of China. This treaty meant recognition of the Bogd Khan as the monarch of the sovereign state of Mongolia by Russia. Nevertheless, under strong pressure from the Russian and Chinese governments, 56, the Treaty of Kyoto, 1915, between Russia, Mongolia, and the Republic of China downgraded the independence of Outer Mongolia to autonomy within China. The government of Mongolia maintained a position of preserving Mongolia's independence, including Khalkha Mongolia, the Kokt region, Western Mongolia, Tuva, Inner Mongolia, Barga, and Upper Mongolia. The position of the Republic of China was that all of Mongolia was territories of China. The position of Russia was to reduce Mongolian independence to an autonomy limited to Outer Mongolia only. Negotiations continued for 8 months as the Mongolian representatives firmly defended the independence of the country, but finally the government of Mongolia had to accept Russia's position. However, Outer Mongolia remained effectively outside the control of the Chinese, who on the other hand controlled Barga, Dzungaria, Tuva, Upper Mongolia, and Inner Mongolia in 1915. On February 2, 1913, Mongolia and Tibet signed a treaty of friendship and alliance. Mongolian agents in Bogd Khan, he was a Tibetan, disrupted Soviet secret operations in Tibet to change its regime in the 1920s. Chinese territory, 1919 to 1921. Following the Russian Revolution of October 1917, China revived its claims to Outer Mongolia, aiming at its conversion into a common Chinese province. In late 1919, the Chinese general Su Shuzheng occupied Urga after suspicious deaths of Mongolian patriotic nobles and forced the Bogd Khan and the leading nobles to sign a document renouncing Mongolia's independence. Leaders of Mongolia's national independence movement, such as Magsurjav and Damdanshurin, were arrested, imprisoned, and even tortured to death. The Chinese had tightened their control of Mongolia by this time. Russian White Guard troops led by Baron von Ungern Sternberg, who had been defeated in the civil war in Transbaikalian Siberia, invaded Mongolia in October 1920. Baron Ungern sought allies to defeat the Bolsheviks. In October-November 1920, Ungern's troops assaulted the capital, Nizhlo-Curie, known to Europeans under the name Urga, now Ulaanbaatar, several times but were repelled with heavy losses. Ungern entered contacts with Mongolian nobles and lamas and received Bogd Khan's edict to regain independence. On 2 to 5 February 1921, after fighting a huge battle, Ungern's force drove the Chinese forces out of the Mongolian capital. One part of the Chinese forces fled to the south to China, and another to the north of Mongolia to enter negotiations with the Far Eastern Republic. The Bogd Khan's monarchic power and his government were briefly restored. Mongolian People's Republic, 1921 to 1992. Bogd Khan failed in his efforts to get aid from Japan and the United States for regaining the independence of Mongolia from China. Later the Chinese forces were defeated by Baron Ungern, but at the same time the Mongolian People's Party, MPP, had been established. The Soviet government saw this party as instrumental for driving Ungern's troops from Mongolia. The MPP was established in early 1921 as a merger of two underground revolutionary groups who had their own views on the future of Mongolia. One of these groups was headed by Solian Danzin, and the other group was headed by Dogsaman Badu. They sought aid from the Soviet Union, which was unacceptable to Bogd Khan. However, for the sake of the country's independence, Bogd Khan endorsed the MPP's letter to the Soviet government. However, the Soviet Union chose not to respond to Bogd Khan's government, instead looking to the MPP to become the rulers of Mongolia. The Mongolian Revolution of 1921 began on March 18, when 400 volunteer troops led by Sukbader attacked the 2,000-man Chinese garrison in Kayokta at the northern frontier of Mongolia. The Mongolian volunteer troops and units of the Soviet Red Army advanced to the south, annihilating the remainder of the defeated Chinese troops and Ungern's white troops. The main battles undertaken by the Mongolian troops took place at Tujian Nars against the Chinese and at Zelter and Bolnai against the white troops. Simultaneously, Katamatar Magsurjav, who had been sent by Baron Ungern to the western provinces, revolted and allied himself with the MPP. He defeated the white troops led by Kazantsev, Vandanov, and Bakich. Mongolian and Soviet troops led by Kozbatar and Baikalov withstood a long encirclement by the whites at Tobo Lake, in present-day Bainalgi Imag. Baron Ungern, after a conspiracy, was deserted by his troops and captured by a detachment of the Red Army. The MPP troops and Russian Red Army troops entered Urga in July 1921. Thus, the revolution ended the Chinese occupation of Mongolia and defeated white Russian forces in Mongolia. Also that year, Mongolian revolutionary leaders adopted the statement of reunification of Mongolia. On the eve of the 1921 revolution, Mongolia had an underdeveloped and stagnant economy based on a nomadic form and an interest in animal husbandry. Agriculture and industry were almost non-existent, transport and communications were primitive, banking, services and trade were almost exclusively in the hands of Chinese or other foreigners. Most people were nomadic herders illiterate, and much of the male labor force lived in the monasteries, contributing little to the economy. Property in the form of livestock belonged mainly to aristocrats and monasteries. Ownership of the remaining sectors of the economy was dominated by Chinese or other foreigners. Mongolia's new rulers thus faced a daunting task in building a modern economy. In 1924, during secret meetings with the Republic of China, the Soviet Union agreed to China's claim to Mongolia. 57. The Soviet Union officially recognized Mongolian independence in 1945. 57. The revolutionary government kept Bogd Khan as nominal head of state, but the actual power was in the hands of the MPP and its Soviet counselors. After the mysterious death of Bogd Khan in 1924, the MPP moved quickly to promulgate a Soviet-style constitution, abolishing monarchy and declaring the Mongolian People's Republic on November 26, 1924. Mongolia became completely isolated from the world by the MPP government, which followed the Soviet Union in implementing the communist experiment. On the other hand, this also provided protection against the potential aggression of China. In 1928, Mongolian politics took a sharp leftward turn. Herds were forcibly collectivized, private trade and transport were forbidden, and monasteries and the nobility came under attack. This led to an economic breakdown and to widespread unrest and armed uprisings in 1932. The MPP and Soviet troops defeated the rebels in October. But as a result, the MPP withdrew its most aggressively socialist policies, as advised by the Comintern, instead adopting the Shiner-Jeltian Bog logo, the so-called policy of the New Turn. The New Turn included the purging of the most leftist members of the leadership under the pretext of Nugala bending and liberalized development of the economy, and was favored by new leaders such as Prime Minister P. Jenden. However, they did not realize that this was a temporary tactical retreat by Stalin and the Comintern. Another wave of repressions began in 1937, presided over by Khorloogiin Khoibilsan, and resulted in the almost complete elimination of the Buddhist clergy. The Buryat Mongols started to migrate to Mongolia in the 1900s due to Soviet oppression. 58. Stalin stopped the migration in 1930 and initiated repressions in Mongolia against both immigrants and native Mongolians. During the Stalinist repressions in Mongolia, presided over by Khorloogiin Khoibilsan, many Buryat men and 22,000 to 33,000 Mongols were killed by NKVD orders. The victims were 3% to 5% of the total population and included monks, pan-Mongolists, nationalists, patriots, military officers, nobles, intellectuals, and common citizens. 59, 60. Some authors also offer much higher estimates, up to 100,000 victims. 60. At this time, Mongolia had an overall population of about 700,000 to 900,000 people. The proportion of victims to the total population was much higher than during the Great Purge in the Soviet Union. In 1939, Soviet and Mongolian troops fought against Japan in the Battle of Khalkhin Gol in eastern Mongolia. 61. In August 1945, at the end of World War II, Mongolian troops took part in the Soviet operations against Japan in Inner Mongolia. Russian historian Viktor Suvorov wrote that in the Soviet war with Germany, Mongolian aid was as important as American aid, because warm clothes decided victory or defeat in the battles. 62, 63, 64. Also in August 1945, the Republic of China had finally agreed to recognize Mongolia's independence if a vote were held. The vote took place in the presence of Chinese observers on 20 October. 65. The official result was 100% for independence. After the 1949 communist victory in China, Mongolia had good relations with both of its neighbors. The Cultural Revolution wreaked much havoc on minority cultures and ethnicities in China. In Inner Mongolia, some 790,000 people were persecuted. Of these, 22,900 were beaten to death and 120,000 remained. 66. When the Sino-Soviet split developed in the 1960s, it aligned itself firmly with the Soviet Union. In 1960, Mongolia gained a seat in the UN, after earlier attempts had failed due to US and Republic of China vetoes. The post-war years also saw the acceleration of the drive towards creating a socialist society. In the 1950s, livestock was collectivized again. At the same time, state farms were established, and, with extensive aid from the USSR and China, infrastructure projects like the Trans-Mongolian Railway were completed. In the 1960s, Darkhan was built with aid from Soviet Union and other Comecon countries, and in the 1970s the Erdenet Combinat was created. Democracy. A modest meeting organized by the Mongolian Democratic Union on December 10, 1989 landmarks the commencement of the democratic movement in Mongolia. The subsequent meetings involved ever-increasing numbers of supporters. A meeting with participation of 100,000 people took place on March 4, 1990 on the square at Cinema Yalalt, now known as the Square of Liberty. The meeting turned into a demonstration, marching to the House of the Government, which then hosted the People's Great Hero, Council of Ministers and the headquarters of MPRP. The demonstrators demanded the resignations of the political bureau of the MPRP, a formation of a provisional people's hero during the month of March, and separation of MPRP from the government. They handed their petition to a representative of the government. Denial of these demands by the communist government led to a hunger strike of the 7 to 10 March 1990 by a number of activists of the Mongolian Democratic Union, resulting in the resignation of the political bureau of the MPRP and negotiations for political reforms. The first democratic election was held in July 1990. The Mongolian People's Republic officially ceased to exist on February 13, 1992. On October 3, 2002, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs announced that Taiwan recognizes Mongolia as an independent country. 67. Although no legislative actions were taken to address concerns over its constitutional claims to Mongolia. 68. Offices established to support Taipei's claims over Outer Mongolia, such as the Mongolian and Tibetan Affairs Commission. 69. Lie dormant and was eventually disbanded in September 2017. In June 2021, former Prime Minister Ukna Kirilsuk, the candidate of the ruling Mongolian People's Party, MPP, became the country's 6th democratically elected president after winning the presidential election.